I am NetMoverSitan, and last time we checked, Moses solved a case of the Distortion, held off a taboo hunter with Ezra's help, and now she has something else to deal with. We continue this with Chapter 21, Roadtrip, where after the battle against Vesper Crabro, which resulted in Zhang De getting his head sliced off, only 5 of the 17 fixers of the Daogui combat office survived, and they had similar injuries to Moses. Yeah, they're going to need replacement arms, and this told Moses that Vesper wasn't about senseless murder. He did what was necessary to achieve his mission. Once he got what he came there for, in this case, Uria's body, he had no reason to remain at the hotel. No reason to slaughter the fixers that stood in his way. Unfortunately, Zhang Li was dead. Moses saw Vesper throw his head on the ground outside the residential area. Fei Lei knew that and asked if she was responsible for that, and was also the reason why she could leave her room. Well, the room part was accurate, but as for her father dying, that was partially due to Vesper. Moses was sorry about that regardless. Fei understood, as it was an occupational hazard for his line of work. Something that Moses understood better than most. As for who to settle up the charge for that request, the Dao Grey Combat Office had a tradition that stated that Fei was the one in that position, as it was inherited. Moses noted that it was quite an unusual office, one with a hereditary system where loyalty was valued above all. Yeah, loyalty wasn't common with fixer offices. But then again, that's something that Moses' office had, which made it stand out among the others, as most others would save their own necks and leave others for dead. Although she did see the problem with this office being led by a 17-year-old, and that it'd probably only be a matter of time before that office disbands. Moses asked if she was going to hold them responsible for what happened, while also thinking that the contract she made with Zhang Dei was a verbal one, as in no documentational evidence to prove that he died protecting them as part of his work. She was concerned about violent payback from that office as a worst-case scenario. Thankfully, Fei told them to heal up before continuing this conversation. Meanwhile, Ezra broke into Vesper's car and got Uria's body back, which, as previously stated, was undamaged. They returned to their office with that body, and it was almost identical to how it was when they left. They both took a HP tablet and then went to sleep, saving the discussion with the Dalgree Combat Office for the next day. And one day later, around lunchtime, the fixers of Moses' office sat on a sofa in the Dalgree Combat Office. Moses explained their situation and stance, telling Faye that they made a deal with her late father. The contract was to hire all fixers of the Dalgree Combat Office for 2 weeks, due to them breaking the taboo of District 14, as in recording video footage, which resulted in that taboo hunter, Vesper Crabro, hunting them. She agreed to pay whatever was demanded according to the rules of the office, but the payment was vaguely discussed. The exact sum wasn't decided, and she didn't disclose the identity of the one that they needed protection from, due to the risk of most refusing to accept that request. And upon hearing about her specialization of solving mysteries and unsolved cases, this led to her solving Faye's particular case, which was a condition of this arrangement. Shortly after solving this case, Vesper came to her house and her father died in the process of defending Moses as part of this agreement. They noted how dry she sounded when she was telling this story. Well, it's probably because she gets this a lot. Or has to do this a lot. Well, Moses continued it by telling her that she risked her life to save her from the distortion. There's no physical proof, but there was a deal involving lives and money, and Faye was aware of this. She hoped to hear her express her condolences to her father. I think she's getting to that. Well, Moses was grateful to Shangdi, even knowing that his opponent was a taboo hunter, not hesitating to brandish his weapon against him in order to protect her. Although she liked the... well, he liked the did it for Faye's sake. Yeah. She was also a priority to him. As for Ezra, apparently she managed to escape from the hotel thanks to the fixers of what was now Faye's office. She appreciated this and expressed her condolences to her late father and the other fixers of her office that are no longer there. If Faye was to continue that fixer office, I could imagine that she'd need some augmentations and weapons, along with recruiting some more fixers. Although she was hopeful that this comforted her father's spirit a bit. And upon hearing all this, Faye decided to continue with the request to protect the people of Moses' office for the remaining 13 days. Moses was touched by Faye's kind heart, even though it felt like she was playing boss, as her office's numbers were devastated. Thankfully, she's cool-headed and focused on reorganization, and Faye was aware of this. Now, it might seem silly and it might not help them long term, but her late father told her that their office was bound together with loyalty. So, that loyalty, as in Moses risking her life to rescue Faye would be repaid. Besides, they'd need to all be alive to deal with their troubles. Moses saw her as a person of will, and this person of will ordered Crane, one of her surviving subordinates, to contact their sister officers, requesting help. Moses thanked President Faye Day, their officers. Well, Moses' office is deeply indebted to her, and not just financially. Faye was taught what to do in case something should happen to her father, and she would learn from her subordinates. Faye decided to settle the request fee proper with Moses, demonstrating that she's meticulous in her business dealings. This was something that Moses left Ezra to deal with, as she's better at that than Moses is. As the negotiations went on, Moses smoked a cigarette in her left hand on the rooftop. Lighting it was difficult, as she only had one hand. As she blew out smoke, she asked herself what was ahead of them. Uriah asked what she'd do about her smoking pipe. Moses asked what she'd do about her workshop. Her atelier was unavailable for a while, as she'd need to recharge her mental power. She can't even reopen it, never mind make teddy bears appear. Thankfully, Moses still had her distortion vision. Uriah vowed to get back to work hard once she was able to. Then Ezra came to them and told them that they got a huge discount. As for Moses, they'll need to get her a new arm before they can head to District 11, leaving the choice of model up to Ezra, as she knew what would best suit her. Although it would be only until they can get her right arm back, so they could surgically attach it back on, along with her pipe. Both were last seen on the person of Vesper Crabro, that taboo hunter of Encore, who held it in a U-Corp preservation cube, which likely operates under a similar principle to the stasis field in The Dwarf, where it was described as, like, X-rays can't pass through lead, time can't penetrate that. Yeah, that sounds about right. So, it would be just as fresh as it was when it was first put in there. Uriah hoped that the stupid Hornets would starve to death if they kept him in her atelier for long enough. Moses wasn't so sure, as a fixer of Vesper's level. They could have procedures taken to allow them to last longer than the unaugmented human when it comes to hunger and thirst. Although it's unclear if Vesper had that kind of augmentation done on him. As for how Vesper rampaging in her workshop, what effect that had on Uriah, she told her that it would take time to restore it. It'd be dead weight for a while, but thankfully her body and mind were safe. Moses could use her brain to work out how to deal with Vesper, so Uriah could let hers rest. As for Ezra's new psychament, it came in the form of a mask. Well, Thankfully, it didn't remove her social and moral inhibitions like a certain other mask. The city couldn't afford to have a big-head killer. I mean, it's crazy enough in places as it is without that. As for this psychomant, Ezra talks with Yuri about that before her battle against Vespa Crabro. She could get stronger with it if she learned how to use it. And Yuri saw that she had a knack for it. Moses wasn't sure that alone would be enough to be what manifested psychomant. Yuri gave her a pendant in addition to that mask. It's another prototype of hers, based on the footage of the fight between Ezra and the Skeleton Titan in Taeyong Produce Company. She carved a pendant that she thought would be compatible with Ezra. It was a catalyst for manifesting psychomant, which also helps to shape it according to the carved mental image. It'd be quite useful in the future, but carving one was time-consuming, and she barely had enough time before the taboo hunter showed up to carve that one in her atelier. Ezra saw that Yuri could help her to become stronger. Yeah, that's the problem, as Vespo was still trapped inside it, with no way out. Although Moses saw the solution to that as meeting up with hee-joon in District 11 and dumping that problem on him. To be honest, he probably had it coming. Although we don't know that much to be sure about that. Although we do know that there's no love lost between them. As for what to do with Yuri's body, Fei Lei would take care of it until they got back. Moses saw this as being too nice, seeing it as a way of ensuring that her father's life wasn't in vain, providing safety and comfort to those he died to protect. Although she couldn't refuse her hospitality. She then decided that it was time to start preparing for the trip. During this, there were 3 days of funerals held for Zhang Li and the 11 subordinates that were killed around the hotel. The funerals conducted according to the traditions of the east section of the city, where Zhang Li was born. Fei stayed in the funeral parlor from start to finish. The photograph of him reminded Moses of the photographer that she met weeks ago. After that, Moses accompanied Ezra on one of her shopping tours of the workshops. They were escorted by the fixers of Daogui Combat Office and its sister offices. From being outside to standing guard around the office to make sure that no intruder would threaten them. Moses also talked to Fei Li about the distortion, what happened to her, and how she should live her life, considering all that happened and her inherited position. On the day that they were to set off for District 11, 30 minutes before the warp train departed, she stopped smoking in the smoking lounge, thinking of how warp trains always reach their destination in a matter of seconds. Yeah. Ezra was waving to her, her dimensional bag over her shoulder. She was thrilled by this. Yuria didn't need a ticket as, well, she was a teddy bear. Although, just to be on the safe side, Moses told her to not draw attention to herself. Faye and the fixers of Daogui Combat Office saw them off. Thankfully, no other taboo hunters made another attempt. Once they got on the train, Moses and Ezra sat on their seats. Ezra was excited about them leaving. They've gone through a series of different hells just to get to that point. And Ezra was excited about the trip that they were going on. Moses cautioned that what would await them might be worse than what they've already been through so far. Ezra was also excited about the food in the southern districts, wanting to try it herself. Moses told her that they'd sample much of that when they get there. Hopefully they'd avoid District 23, as the food there is disgusting. As for the journey, from their perspective, it was a matter of seconds. But those of us well, if you've been through the main story of Library of Ruina, you'll know that they've been through 1,000 years, give or take, of insanity and torment. Would it result in Ezra beating Moses repeatedly with her own artificial arm? One of those two tearing apart Yuria? Well, if the other journey was anything to go by, it won't be good. And whatever happened, the save state would be loaded from before the journey began, and as far as the fixers of Moses' office were concerned, the journey went well. And they were in the warp station of District 11, K-Corp territory, where two people that Moses wanted to meet were hee-joon and Diaz. Now we have Chapter 22, Part 1's Epilogue, and Part 2's Prologue. Yeah, all of that was Part 1, where hee-joon was right outside the warp terminal, waiting for Moses' office to appear. And upon him being in hearing range, he said, "At last," where he was likely thinking, as expected, as if he knew that she was in his trap, like she had any choice in this matter. Moses was unsure why he was meeting them there rather than them coming to his workshop in the southern branch of Seven Association, as he instructed. Apparently he decided to save time and meet them there, and then asked about Moses' right arm, when he noticed it was artificial. Moses had no time for this false sense of concern, telling Ezra to deal with what he has to say to them while she's in the smoking lounge. Then someone called for Moses, realizing that when hee-joon said "at last," it didn't mean as I expected. He really meant in spite of everything. Moses understood how he was screwing her over. Ezra stood between Moses and this unwelcome guest. And this unwelcome guest was Diaz. the one commanding the Ujats. Ezra told the intruder to just leave, as they can't handle this today, although her voice was quavering. Diaz claimed that she forgot about what happened that day, asking if they can't go back to how they used to be, asking Han Hee-joon if it was all in the past. He stayed silent. Yeah, Moses couldn't forget that she led hundreds to their deaths, wanting to save them from Diaz, but she was unable to. That would explain a few things. Moses asked what was she plotting with Taeyong Produce Company in District 14, referring to the Distortion siphoning boxes, while restraining her feelings. Before Diaz can answer that, Han Hee-joon told her that Dr. Moses had to take care of an urgent matter for Seven Association. Diaz understood and told him to invite them to her home later. Han Hee-joon understood that he'd do that as soon as she finished her mission. So, at least Moses used to be one of the Ujats, and that all of what she did was too much, that she couldn't continue with that, and at some point became a fixer for Seven Association. Well, a fixer with an affiliation with them anyway. She thought about this dark chapter of her past as they sat in the back seat of Han Hee-joon's vehicle. As for the reasons why she's in District 11, it's not about the money, it's not about keeping her in the Seven Association, it's not even to solve distortions. It's to face her past, a past that she's been running from. And she knows she needs to stop running from it. Han Hee-joon told them that Seven Association wanted the distortion in its whole. As he explained 2 months before, asking if they were listening to him, as he was explaining that they were heading to a rural village that they've been observing for those 2 months, seeing it as time to harvest the fruit. Moses asked if the town was ravaged by the distortion already. Han Hee-joon told her that it's distorted but peaceful. They didn't need to see the distortion to tell that. Then the car stops and they got out of the car. He directed them to walk down the street for around 15 minutes and they'll find a small village. Moses asked what she's supposed to do there, as there's no documentation dealing them. Well, no documentation detailing that mission. Ignoring this, Han Hee-joon, inside the safety of his car, well, whatever the vehicle was anyway, noticed that she's missing her pipe, as she's smoking a cigarette instead. Moses ignored this, asking what they're supposed to be doing there. He told them to investigate the place, draw a cogent conclusion from it, and report what happened there to Seven Association. Moses got the message and swung her hand at him, which basically told him, I get the idea, now get the out of my sight, hole. He told them that it would be a wretched job, saying, please survive, before he completely raised the driver window and drove off. he sounded ominous. Well, he was using them as canaries in a cage to see if it was safe for them to go in. Well, that's how it appears anyway. There was still the matter of Vesper Crabber to deal with. Let's hope that he's ready for what Moses has for him to deal with. Well, there's certainly going to be a lot of bad karma for hee-joon to catch up on. Moses then told both Ezra and Uriah to get ready. Ezra understood, and Uriah complained about how cramped it was in that coat pocket, and went back on Moses' shoulder. They headed in the general direction of the village along the narrow street, where their first mission in District 11 would begin. Yes, the end of Part 1 and the start of Part 2. As for the arcs in this, in Part 1 of the Distortion Detective, Chapter 6 and 7 is a mini-arc, a two-parter introducing Uriah Atelier. Chapters 8 through 13 was the Tai Young Produce Company arc, which revealed that Diaz had some part in that. Chapters 15 to 21 was the Taboo Hunter arc, where Moses' office had to do what they could to evade Vesper Crabro, M-Corp's Taboo Hunter, who was no weak combatant. Let's just say that. We now start Chapter 23. Quercus Village. It was 10 a.m. The sun was shining on a somber alley up a winding street. The winding streets and unknown paths were one thing that was common between the back streets in the south and the back streets of the north. When walking down the winding streets that are unfamiliar, it's a risk, whether you're in the back streets or a nest. Well, Daniel, that elite that ended up joining Elcor, and Carmen, one of the founders of the latest iteration of Elcor, they're both proof of that. Well, this is because each area has its own culture, which could be terrifying and intimidating to the uninitiated. They walked down the street as hee-joon instructed for around 15 minutes, and then they found Quercus village. It was unclear what the details are about it. Culture, taboos, or, well, anything. Then again, as much as hee-joon was a shady creep, as far as Moses was concerned, he's not one to lead them to death in a primeval way. She smokes at the entrance before entering the village. Ezra asks if they should prepare for combat, just in case. Moses didn't think that would be wise, as they lacked any knowledge of what it's like in there. They should pretend that they're travelers. Yeah. It's best not to provoke them if they're not hostile. Uriah suggested that Seonbae explore the local eateries. Moses had an idea based on that, coming up with a cover story. They disguised themselves as travel writers who tour small restaurants hidden in the alleyways and street corners around the city. This cover involves evaluating the quality of the food. Or to sum it up, a food critic. Ezra is her travel partner and bodyguard. She's there to escort her in case of anyone hiding behind corners that are hostile. That is a risk in the backstreets. And Ezra likes that idea from Moses. As for Yuria, if she has to speak, she should keep her voice low, as it would save them having to explain how a teddy bear can move and speak. They then headed into the village, which turned out to be quite cozy. Lush flowers and grass were lining the streets. Houses and buildings were in vibrant colours, which was out of place, certainly outside of some nests. There was also nice-looking brick houses. The buildings aren't even grey like most backstreet buildings in the city. Something was off with that place. I mean, something outside of a nest being that calm and pleasing? It was like a fairy tale town. Although there might be other places like that in the city that Moses is unaware of. As for Ezra, she was impressed with this as well. She wanted to see if there was anyone to talk to. But there wasn't, due to it being a weekday and they luckily had jobs to do and money to earn. Moses told her to look for eateries, as they need to get to work investigating the distortion there. Whatever it is. Ezra gladly did so. This excited her, while Moses followed. As for this town, there were around 50 households, with an estimated population of around 80 people. After a short while, Ezra found an eatery, Dimar Tea House. This cafe was small with 4 tables, with a floor space of 15 payong, that's 49.5 square meters, or 533.7 square feet. The proprietor greeted them. He wasn't expecting visitors. Moses asked if that place was open. The owner of that shop confirmed that it was. And it wasn't because of the time of day that he was surprised. It was because of it being a remote spot, so visitors from the outside were quite rare. He seems wary of them, understandably. Moses told him that she was surprised as well, not expecting such a beautiful town in an unexpected place like that. She introduced herself as Momo, a travelling gourmet seeking out unknown restaurants in obscure locations, and Ezra introduced herself as Iziz. Yeah, that alias was just as elaborate. As in, not very. The owner agreed with them about the prettiness of the town. As for the food, it's not famous for that. Moses told him that visiting them for the first time is a genuine pleasure for her. Well, she's certainly getting into character. The owner introduced himself as Dewey, who brought them a menu as they sat at a table at that charming tea house. Its wooden construction and the sunlight shining through the windows provided a sense of serenity and relaxation that usually those outside of a nest, at least, can only dream of. Ezra then suggested that they try out every dish on the menu, much to the exasperation of Moses, who had to hold her back. As she said that their rule was to only try 3 dishes that the chef recommends, much to Ezra's disappointment. Dewey recognized the bear that Moses had, which Yuria had her mind in, as Kurmi, the red bear. It was famous before it got discontinued. Moses was unfamiliar with this. Dewey was aware of this. As for Yuria, she was trembling for some reason. Moses explained that it was a gift from an acquaintance of hers. Both she and Ezra tried to their way out of this, but failed miserably, so she told him that they came from the north of the city. Dewey hasn't left District 11, never mind got close to the north, or indeed anywhere else. Although, that's a typical response for most city folk, partly due to documentation being needed for movement to different parts of the city. Yeah, no escape from bureaucracy even there. Moses then wanted 3 dishes of Dewey's suggestion. Dewey then went into the kitchen to prepare their dishes. As to why the town was so quiet, it was because it was the Harvest Festival. So you might think it's some equivalent of Chuseok. But I doubt it is. Those that have time to spare are preparing for the ceremony in the town hall. Moses noted that it seemed to be a closed village with unique customs, which, based on her experience, usually ends with creepy cannibalism. Oh, let's hope not. There's enough of this in the city as it is. Or cults-based carnage. Although, so far, this didn't appear to be the case, as she wouldn't be sent there by Section 2 of the Seven Association if it was that simple. As for joining that festival, she asked if she could, along with Ezra, join in. Dewey told them that they were welcome to do so. Well, at least they didn't reject outsiders, nor were they actively inviting them to participate as a sacrificial animal, making it more convenient for their mission. It saves them having to sneak into it. Dewey brought out black tea, vanilla-flavoured pancakes, and moderately soft omelettes for each of them. And Dewey went to ask everyone in the town hall about that, to see if it was okay. Ezra considered it quite orthodox. Well, the food. The black tea was fragrant. There's a certain arbiter that would be at home there. As for the tea house, no distortions were found in it. Dewey then came back, and the townspeople said it was okay for them to join in. They'd head there once they were done eating and drinking. Moses saw this as convenient, as it'd make their job faster. Ezra found the meal overwhelmingly satisfying. When they left, it was just past 1 p.m. Moses saw that village as potentially somewhere to retire. Well, if she lives long enough to be able to retire. Then they got to the town hall, the widest building there, and Dewey introduced Momo and Iziz to the 40 people there. They were welcomed warmly. Yeah, that was suspicious, which was why hee-joon requested their services. They were greeted by Domis, the head of the village, Moses told them that they were travelers searching for restaurants around the corners of the back streets. Moses thanked them for allowing them to join the festival of their village. Domis saw it as the charm of travelling, as festivals are more fun where there are other people to celebrate with. And this festival appeared to involve making effigies out of tree branches. Let's hope it doesn't involve a giant one being made that's set on fire with an outsider inside it, after that outsider was subject to being attacked by a swarm of bees. Moses offered their assistance to help out. Domis thought that they deserved rest. Moses believed that participating in all stages of a festival, starting with its preparation, is a way to truly enjoy it as they did. Domis agreed to let them join. They observed the townsfolk preparing for it. And what she sees confirms her suspicion. It's not just in her head. And what is that? She asked if there was a place that she could smoke there to one of the villagers, and they'd be fine with that as long as none were outside and, well, as long as she doesn't litter the ground. Moses understood. When it was 4 p.m, no one was outside, and she smoked. Uriah asked if she figured out anything, and Moses voiced her confirmed suspicion. No distortion was on any of the townspeople. Chapter 24 continues this story, The Emotions of Life, where Uriah continued this conversation by saying that if she can't see distortions, the villagers must have psychoments. As for the truth of the matter, they'll see soon enough. Moses was thinking to herself, if she had her pipe, she could use the white breath to figure the situation out more quickly. Unfortunately, the pipe and her right arm were with Vesper inside Uriah's atelier, but that was a situation to deal with another time. She walked back to the town hall. Ezra wanted Moses, and Moses asked what they needed to do. Dewey told her that they're asking them to aid them in preparing food for the festivals, seeing as epicures would like to see the process firsthand, which made Moses a little nervous as she wasn't a cook. Ezra was aware of this and was open to that, much to Moses' irritation. Dewey offered to help her out, and his wife Miu was there to help them, who greeted them and, like the others, showed no distortion. Moses said that she'd try, although she warned that they're not skilled in the culinary arts. Miu told her not to worry about as they prepare special kinds of food for the festival. Moses thought about what that meant. Well, it'd be too cliché to be human meat. Yeah, it's not District 23. They followed Miu and saw that around 10 people were in the kitchen preparing the ingredients for the food. They could smell the flour dough in the air. Ezra went with Miu to prepare the ingredients. Both she and Moses washed their hands and put on aprons. As for what they're making, according to Dewey, it was bread and soup. Well, Moses would have to be especially if she that up. Apparently the plainness is deliberate. as the mind becomes contaminated when the stomach is filled with delicious, extravagant food. Yeah, extravagant food. Well, Moses understood it as eating extravagantly contaminated the mind, and that it was a novel way of putting it. Dewey saw that she understood it as how their town leader saw it. Yes, to work tirelessly for the mental soundness of them. The festival was a part of their efforts. It was intended to wash away the filth from their minds, which was why crime was as non-existent there as workers' rights were in the rest of the city. There aren't many other communities in that city that could say the same. Then she sees that Dewey had tiny arms crawl out of him. The distortion was manifesting as they were speaking. It appeared that he said something that provoked his own mind. Ezra and Miu brought the clean ingredients to them. Dewey put the ingredients in the pots, one by one, waiting for some time before each was added. As for this festival, it's monthly. It's also simple and modest. The bread and soup might be simple, but they need to put in some effort into it. Moses understood it like this. It was a monthly festival where the mind was cleansed in a pseudo-religious rite. The soup consisted of carrots, potatoes, mushrooms, and, well, let's just say the rest wouldn't be turned away from your average vegetarian. In fact, this almost sounds like something Buddhist. Well, certainly the parts where they steer clear of meat. Well, there are other religions where meat is avoided. And just as Moses was about to add the salt to the soup, as she was thinking of what she's put together so far, where the festival where the mind was cleansed, which meant no distortions on the townspeople, except Dewey, who manifested it as far as Moses was concerned, although only she could see it due to her distortion vision. Well, Moses needed more to go on, although she was stopped from, well, adding sugar to it by mistake. She found no suspicious ingredients, no hallucinogenics or anything that would alter the perception of reality. The people were sitting in the town hall cafeteria, on tables for 6. Each had a soup with some loaf. Well, a loaf of bread each, in front of them. There was also a stage in front of them. Ezra wasn't happy that the soup was completely devoid of meat. Moses ignored this. She was focused on the distortion of the townspeople, which varied from mild to slight. As for the townspeople, only 57 of them were there. Domi saw that they were all accounted for. It would appear that with 50 households, it's possible that most live alone. As for what the effigies represent, well, whatever they represent, they occupy the seats where the townsfolk should be. Where were they? Domi saw no filth on Miss Momo, believing her to be pure of heart based on this. Could this be another with distortion vision? Domi, the town leader, then announced the start of the Harvest Festival. Then they burst out into laughter. Moses and Ezra joined in, observing the normal behavior during this. They laughed for 10 minutes. And when Dummy stopped, the others stopped. The distortions had progressed a little. Then they ate the soup, which took less than 5 minutes to do. Then Domis called for the anger to be let out, where people let out profanities at the effigies that were too vulgar to describe, and would be enough to make a foul-mouthed Scottish chef blush. Okay, that. The Prince of Darkness himself would think it was too much. Yet Moses and Ezra did the same, to not arouse suspicion. This progressed the distortions farther than they did previously. Then they stopped this when Domis stopped. Then they ate the bread, which was the size of a fist, with no particular flavour. Then they heard a loud noise of teeth biting into something hard next to her. This came from Dewey, due to a black object inside the bread, which felt familiar to Moses. Domis then called for applause. The townspeople did so, and Dewey was ordered to go to the chair. He obeyed, and sat on the steel chair on the stage. Domis then told everyone to cry for Dewey, who would receive all of their filth. Clearly, whoever got that object in the bread would be chosen for this, and it appeared to be a random selection. Yeah. Whoever got that object would be chosen for that honour. They cried their hearts out for him, the sacrifice he was about to make. Well, I guess Moses was right the first time. It just wasn't as selective as that. Then Domis put the tiny box on Dewey's head as the distortions were growing more severe, which resembles the same situation in Taeyong Produce Company, but it was smaller. Moses wanted to put a stop to this, to save Dewey. Then the box began to vibrate. Uriah understood what was happening. Moses then ordered Ezra to pull Dewey out of that chair. And while this was happening, a stream of distortions, which started to sprout out from Miyu and the others, were being pulled out of them, where Dewey was chosen to be the one to take in all of the village's distortions, the filth as Domis put it, which warped Dewey in an unspeakable manner. Ezra's distortions about to be pulled out of her, while she was trying to get closer to Dewey. Moses asked what would happen if it was extracted from someone. Well, would the mental scars go with that? Moses then revealed a blade within her artificial arm. She held the blade of her arm at Domi's throat, telling him to stop this. Domis wasn't paying much attention to this, telling the others to rejoice. The others cheered. They did so, and making the passing of Dewey a joyful one. Then Dewey, or what's left of him, was dropped down into a basement in a trapdoor in the stage. Or rather, using a trapdoor there. The basement wasn't that deep. Moses decided to follow Dewey while taking Ezra with her. They barely got through before it closed. Once they were in the basement, they found out the truth of this festival. It was a prison. A distortion of distortions. An amalgamation of people's distortions. 45 of them were down there. The same number as the wooden effigies. They likely had varying abilities. Dewey was a mass of arms and legs, making swarms of butterflies and was seeping soap suds. This wasn't a good situation, as the distortions were heading in their general direction. Ezra was out cold and Moses didn't have her pipe. Thankfully, there was a doorway. So Moses asked if Uriah could open up her workshop. Uriah confirmed that she could. Moses ordered her to do so. Uriah summoned the workshop by touching the metal door. Moses tried to use the fairy to open that door, as it wouldn't open otherwise, but it still wouldn't move. It was sealed from the outside. A door that doesn't see its intended use. Trouble was heading closer to them. She decided to rely on the strength of her expensive artificial arm that Ezra chose. And the noise this made attracted a bestial distortion's attention, which charged at her. What Moses was doing was pushing her arm to its limits. And after straining that arm, the door opened, and a flash of yellow light charged at this distortion and made a gaping hole in that distortion's chest. The hole made by a yellow harpoon. Vesper Crabro emerged. He was not in good shape. He had matted hair and had a haggard look. He drew his yellow hondo, saying that Moses will have to take responsibility for what she's done. Moses at this point was probably thinking, was she better off with the distortions? Yeah, it's clear that Moses was desperate. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let out Vesper Crabro from the atelier. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!